We are now on part 6 of chapters 37 to 50 of Genesis in the Messianic Jewish Family Bible Tree of Life version. And there are some Bible verses that I wanted to touch on here in relation to what I just read in chapter 40. So we're going to go there now. And these are in the footnotes below. So Revelation 5. Chapter 5, verse 5. Then one of the elders tells me, Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is worthy to open the scrolls and its 7 seals. So this is, like I was mentioning, when Jacob is addressing Judah, he's actually also saying that the scepter will not pass from Judah. So he's also making reference to Yeshua. In Revelation 19:15, so it's chapter 19 and verse 15, from his mouth comes a sharp sword, that with it he may strike down the nations, and he shall rule them with an iron rod, and he treads the winepress of the furious wrath of Elohai Sabaoth. And again, we're referring back to, this is in addition to when Jacob was talking with Judah. So then we have Matthew 21:5. Say to the daughter of Zion, see, your king is coming to you, humble and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. And that's exactly what he said to Judah. Binding his foal to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garment in wine, and in the blood of grapes his robe. And Zechariah 9:9 is actually says, Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, a righteous one bringing salvation. He is lowly, riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And John chapter 12, verse 15 says, Fear not, daughter of Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. So there's several verses that refer to this, what Jacob was saying to Judah. And then we're going to go to Revelation 19:13. And that reads, He is clothed in a robe, dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. So those were the Bible references that were footnoted for chapter 40. So we're going to go to chapter 50, the very final chapter here, and that is lamentation for Jacob. Joseph fell upon his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. Then Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. So they took 40 days for him, because that is how long embalming takes, and Egypt wept 70 days. When the days of formal weeping passed, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's house, saying, If I have found favor in your eyes, please say in Pharaoh's ears, My father made me take an oath, saying, Behold, I am about to die in my tomb, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. There you must bury me. So now please allow me to go up and bury my father and then return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, just as he made you swear an oath. So Joseph went up to bury his father. Also, all of Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt went up with him, along with all of Joseph's house, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and cattle were left in the land of Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very impressive company. When they came to the threshing floor of the bramble on the other side of the Jordan, they mourned there, a very great and solemn lamentation. He observed 7 days of mourning for his father. When the inhabitants of the land Canaanites, saw the mourning ritual at the threshing floor of the prickly bush, they said, A solemn mourning ritual this is for the Egyptians. That is why it is called Abel-Mizraim. which is on the other side of the Jordan. So Jacob's sons did for him just as he commanded them. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, the field that Abraham bought as a property for burial from Ephron the Hittite, next to Mamre. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all those who went up with them to bury his father. I kind of paused there because I didn't know if my counter was working here on this recording, but yeah, it's actually working, so I'm good. Joseph comforts his brothers. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father had died, they said, maybe Joseph will be hostile towards us and pay us back in full for all the evil we showed him. So they charged Joseph, saying, before his death, your father gave a command, saying, thus you must say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgressions of your brothers and their sin because they treated you wrongly. Therefore, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Then Joseph wept when they spoke to him, and his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your slaves. And Joseph said to him, don't be afraid, for am I in the place of God? Yes, you yourselves planned evil against me. God planned it for good, in order to bring about what it is this day, to preserve the lives of many people. So now don't be afraid. I myself will provide food for you and your little ones. So be reassured then. So he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's sons, and and also the sons of Machir, Manasseh's son, was born upon Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely take notice of you and will bring you up from this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made Israel's sons swore an oath. They swore an oath. When God takes notice of you, you will bring my bones up from here. So Joseph died at 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph made them promise that when they were to leave Egypt, that they were to take his bones to the promised land to give a proper burial to the bones. So I'm going to recap on this. So in chapters 42 to 43, this deals with Joseph being reunited with his family of origin. So in chapter 42, his brothers came to visit Egypt because of the famine, and Jacob sent them to Egypt for corn so they would not die. 10 of the brothers first went. Benjamin did not go, and Jacob was concerned that if he went, something would happen to him like it did to Joseph. So Joseph um, actually said that they would not see him again unless they brought his brother, and he kept Simeon also. So what happened is they had paid for the corn, and when they were returning, they realized that their money was returned to them. So it really distressed them. They were afraid. They didn't know what to expect, and now they had Simeon, and now they were going to run out of food again, and they had to bring Benjamin with, or they wouldn't even get food. It wasn't even going to be worth them actually going down to Egypt. So this is where they were at. So they actually convinced their father to let Benjamin go with them, and he did allow that. He actually sent the best fruits, a present of balm, honey, spices, myrrh, nuts, and almonds for the man in charge, and double the money because the money that had been restored to them they were going to pay back. So they did all of that, and as it turns out, as you know, they met with Joseph, and they had a meal, and then they were given food to go back, and actually Joseph had it set up that their money was returned, and his precious cup was put in Benjamin's sack. So they were brought back, and then they were really afraid that he was going to keep Benjamin as a slave. And Judah actually pleaded for him and said, "No, keep me. My father. This is going to kill my father. It is going to bring him down to Sheol, down to the grave. You're going to kill him." And so Joseph finally revealed himself and had the family all come to Goshen and set them up and took care of them. And the famine was really, really bad to the point where people actually sold their land, sold themselves into slavery. And that's what happened there. Jacob got reunited with Joseph. Ja- Jacob gave blessings to Joseph and to Joseph's sons, and also did his farewell um, speech or whatever you want to call it with all of his family, with his sons, and he blesses his sons and prophesied over them. Um, and one of the prophecies with Judah has to do with Yeshua. So in part 2 of chapter 49, Jacob died, and he had made Joseph promise to take him back to the cave um, in the field of Machpelah. That was the family plot, basically. And Pharaoh granted him permission, and so that was done. And then in time, at the end of chapter 50, Joseph actually dies as well. And he lived to be 110 years old. I'm sorry. He lived 110 years, um, and then he made a promise that his bones would be carried out of Egypt if the children of Israel left Egypt. And so that oath was made with Joseph. So there's a few little other tidbits I want to give before we end this teaching. So, a quick summary of Genesis chapters 37 to 50. Um, Joseph was the favorite son, and he was hated by his brothers who were jealous. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver. He was taken into Egypt as a slave. Joseph was imprisoned in Egypt, but God remained with him, and he ended up being promoted, actually. And Joseph and his family entered Egypt to escape the famine, and Joseph is a shadow or type of Yeshua. And these are some of the examples, and I'm going to go into a little bit more of a detail then, um, but I'm just doing a real quick summary with you. Both Joseph and Jesus were beloved by their fathers. Both were shepherds. Both were greatly tempted. When you think about what Potiphar's wife tempted him with, both were taken into Egypt. Both were sold for a slave's price. Both were highly exalted and promoted after suffering. The comparisons give the reader an idea of a type or an example in the Old Testament of a reality in the New Testament. In Genesis 49, the 12 tribes of Israel are blessed and prophesied over Jacob, who was also called Israel by God. In the book of Genesis, it shows how God provided a family through which he could bring the promised Messiah, the promised Redeemer, to earth. Now, Joseph loved God, and even though his situation was bleak, God used this to elevate him. And God used Joseph to preserve the lives affected by the famine, including his own family. Messiah would later come out of the tribe of Judah. Judah was one of Joseph's brothers. Joseph became lord over all of Egypt, second in command of Pharaoh, and he managed the affairs of Pharaoh in order for survival of the 7 years of famine that was to strike the land. Even though his brothers meant harm for him, God turned it around for good. No matter what his brothers meant, God is Lord of all, and he has a larger plan. And in Genesis 45, 4 to 9, Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, I pray. And they came near, and he said, I'm Joseph, your brother, who you sold to Egypt. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves that you sold me, for God did send me here to preserve your life. For these 2 years has there been famine in the land, and yet there are 5 more in which there's neither going to be eating or there's not going to be harvesting at all of anything. And God sent me before to preserve you, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh and a lord of all his house and ruler through the land of Egypt. And so this is what Joseph has said. And then he was telling them that they needed to go and get his father and tell his father that Joseph, your son, is still alive. And again, he reminded them in Genesis 50, verse 20, and I'm going by the King James version on this, actually. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good to bring to pass as it is this day to save much people alive. And I'm going to pause it here and I'm going to come back and we're going to actually do a comparison of Joseph and Yeshua and show you the similarities. It's very, very interesting to look at that.